District 101 Summer TLI sessions. The online TLIs are intended to provide information. There we go. Intended to provide information that helps bring your leadership and communication skills to the next level. So tonight's presenter will share with us the meaning of the Toastmasters Promise. Now, all of us agree to that promise when we signed our membership application into Toastmasters. So what is our relationship to that promise? We ask you to stay muted throughout the presentation. And if you have a question, please enter your question in the chat. Try to minimize the use of the chat just to enter questions if possible, so that Jackie and I can easily identify the question to share later with Pat when we get to the Q&A portion of the presentation. Now, Pat Johnson is a speaker, a trainer, a facilitator, a life coach, an author, a mentor, twice Region Advisor and current Region 2 Advisor, a presidential citation recipient, and Toastmasters International President 2010 to 2011. Pat is a certified world-class speaking coach and international trainee who first joined Toastmasters in 1983. Now, in her journey from her club to area to district to international director to international president, she's explored the meaning of the Toastmaster Promise and our core ethics. With her presentation, I promise, let's welcome distinguished Toastmaster, past international president, Pat Johnson.
Thank you so much, Salazar, and welcome everyone from District 101 and wherever else you may be joining us from. When I was senior vice president, which is what now called president-elect, there was an earthquake in Haiti, and the district at that time, District 81's conference, had planned to be in Haiti. And with a couple of weeks' notice, they rapidly moved it to St. Lucia. Gary Schmidt, who was then international president, called me up on the phone and said, "Pat, I need you to go to St. Lucia." And I'm like, "Oh, I couldn't go to St. Lucia. When do I leave?" And of course, I was thrilled to go. I went as a goodwill trip and support from World Headquarters and the board of directors. The district had been traumatized by the earthquake and had rapidly, with great teamwork, moved that conference to St. Lucia. Well, I arrived and I was thrilled to be there. I was basking in the heat, the humidity, and the hospitality. The first evening, I went to the outdoor building where we were going to hold the opening ceremonies. I walked in and was greeted, met a number of people, and went to the front of the room with the district director. And as we stood there, the MC for the evening stepped forward and asked, would everybody rise? And the entire 100 and some people, members of Toastmasters, stood in mass. And as the invitation went, would all of you please recite with me the Toastmasters Promise? Was I ever happy that my back was to those 100 and some people? Because I, as the president-elect, did not know the Toastmaster Promise by heart. And as I listened to this great drone of voices behind me repeat word for word the Toastmasters Promise, I made myself a promise. When I got on the plane and left St. Lucia, I pulled out the Toastmasters Promise and reread it many, many times. Now, I discovered that I'm not a great memorizer, but I do love to delve into the words and what it means. And I was also brought back to the realization that when I joined Toastmasters in 1983, I had actually signed this promise. And I asked myself, What is my relationship to promises? Not just Toastmasters Promise, which was certainly front and center at that moment, but when I make a promise to my friends or to my family, or when I make a promise at work that I'll do something. What is my relationship to promise? And so I struggled and I contemplated that bigger question. And then I finally came back to looking at the words of that Toastmaster Promise. And I want to share them with you tonight, because when I was president, we started putting it inside the front cover of every Toastmaster magazine, because I went looking for it and I said, we don't publish this often enough, because this is our code. This is our honor as individuals that we've signed and we've made a promise to ourselves, to our fellow members, to our club, to our area, to our division, to our district, and to the board of directors, to all our friends, to all our colleagues, and to ourselves. So I looked at the words, and it says that as a member of Toastmasters International and my club, I promise to attend club meetings regularly. Now, there's wiggle room in this line because it says regularly, and we can all interpret regularly. We say, well, for me, regularly is that I go once every 2 months, and I'm regularly there once every 2 months. But was that the spirit of it, or are we just justifying what we're comfortable with? What did I really promise my club members? What did I promise myself? Well, I know that in Toastmasters, learning is experiential. So I need to show up and I need to practice in front of people that are going to give me feedback, that are going to tell me the truth, that are going to love me in spite of how well or how poorly I do that task. So if I attend regularly, I will also get the benefit of regular love and feedback from my colleagues. So I chose to say, well, my club meets on a weekly basis. So if I'm attending my club meeting regularly, I think for me, not for you, but for me, I need to go weekly. So as a result, I very seldom miss a Toastmaster meeting, because that's my promise to me, to my club members, to my area, my division, my district, and the board of directors. So it goes on to say that I promise to prepare all of my speeches and leadership assignments to the best of my ability, basing them on the projects in the Toastmaster program. Oh, what is the best of my ability? How many of you have actually done that speech on the way to the meeting? Is that the best you can do? Is that to the best of your ability? Well, I have a rationale for that. I'm practicing my impromptu speaking. I'm practicing writing a speech very quickly and very rapidly, and I want to see how good I can get at it. But we all know the difference of when we prepare fully and we take on those assignments and do them to our best of our ability, what the difference is. When we stretch, when we ask ourselves to stretch and grow and take on those challenges, try that feedback that somebody gave us that we're like, oh, that doesn't suit me. Try it. It might just be uncomfortable for the first while, and then it might become like that favorite new pair of shoes. Once you get used to it, it's just right. It fits you, it suits you, and it enhances what you bring. The next promise was to prepare for and fulfill meeting assignments. Well, that's a huge promise, because how often do we as general evaluator fail to call the evaluators? Just to remind them. Or perhaps you've said, well, this week, our evaluations are actually going to follow the theme of the meeting. So we're going to up the ante as you give your evaluation, build in the theme of the meeting. If it's sunshine and roses is the theme, for example, then I want you to think about how that builds into the feedback that you're providing the speakers. So to prepare and fulfill those meeting assignments is challenging. And are we a good Toastmaster? Have we called all our team and supported them? When we look at this promise, what it drives me to think about is, what am I learning? What is this promise asking me to do? And what am I taking away from this? What I take away from preparing fully for all my assignments is that I learn to be a better leader. I build a better team. I learn to ask for help. I learn to let people do things their way sometimes, only sometimes. And it depends on who they are, right? If I like their ideas or not. But all those pieces come in as we prepare and fulfill those meeting assignments. What a job it is for those of us that love to talk to be the table topics master and not get to tell our story, but to ask other people to share their story. What a skill to learn, and how it follows us in all walks of life, wherever we are. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and we're just starting to build a relationship. And I asked a lot of questions because I was genuinely curious about that person. But that's something I've learned to do by chairing meetings, by being the contest chairperson when there's a contest. So it's all transferable. Then we come to the most transferable skill in the whole world, as far as I'm concerned, is to provide fellow members with helpful, constructive evaluations. Well, where wouldn't this work? Like, how many times have you given feedback to the clerk at the grocery store? Was it helpful and positive and friendly? Sometimes maybe not. Were they helpful and friendly and positive back? Maybe not either. But to find the gift in this is, for me, is to find the strength, to find the greatest gift that that person has, and highlight it, to keep their highest possible expectations of that person present, and give them feedback that causes them to step forward and step up and to continue growing. And I think this is, as part of our promise, such an important and challenging undertaking. You know, if we show up and Pat's on the program and she's been on the program for 3 weeks in a row, it's like, oh, here we go again. I already know what she sounds like. I know how she talks. I know how she tends to construct her presentations. And it's the same old, same old, same old. And so and then we're called to do an evaluation and we go, well, that was a pretty good presentation. Well, what can we learn from that? Nothing. I don't have any suggestions. I'm stumped. I don't know. It's as good as, whatever it might be. Is that really providing helpful, constructive evaluations? So I'm not saying that it's easy, but it challenges us to think creatively, to think outside the box. What if we ask somebody to do something that even for us is uncomfortable to suggest? Like, I saw a person do a presentation not too long ago, and they used rocks and marshmallows as a beautiful illustration of a concept. And I had this overwhelming desire to see this person get crazy with both marshmallows and rocks. And I didn't know exactly what it would look like, but I voiced it. And they started laughing at the feedback because they said they actually felt like doing that as well. And said, oh, I'm going to try and figure out how that would work. So while sometimes it feels strange and uncomfortable for us, it may resonate with the person. And we've promised to provide something helpful, constructive, and positive. One of the things that when it comes to evaluation and keeping this promise in mind is to remember for each one of us when we started out, when we have those brand new members, and how valuable that feedback was, those evaluations, how they allowed us to take baby steps at our own pace, in our own way, to continue growing our skills. And as we got more advanced, we wanted more advanced evaluations. So one of the things that I've started doing in my club quite a while ago is that when we have a distinguished Toastmaster that's presenting, or somebody that's said, I want a more robust evaluation, I actually say that with your permission, I'm going to provide a more robust evaluation today that will be, in my opinion, consistent with the degree of where you are in your development. Because I don't want to scare the new person in the club. I don't want them to think, oh, that was so harsh. I don't want that. I'm not going to speak. And yet, our advanced speakers want that from us. So keep in mind your promise. Check it out with the speakers if you're evaluating them, and keep your promise to them to support them in their growth. The next part is that I promise to help the club maintain the positive, friendly environment necessary for all members to learn and grow. Well, what does this mean? And I'm curious of what you think this means. So I'm going to invite you to unmute and just share a couple of words of what you think it is to maintain a positive, friendly environment necessary for all members to learn and grow. What does that look like for you?
Feeling comfortable to speak up and share your thoughts during the meeting.
Okay, great, Sarah. Thank you. Anyone else?
To build a safe place for people to fail.
Yes, how beautiful. Thank you for those words. To create a safe place for people to fail and to fall. Like somebody said to me, how did you get to where you got? And I said, I just kept falling on my face and I fell forward each time. And when no one was looking, I crept forward a little bit and then I'd stand up again. Because I've had a safe place for 30 some years to practice. There was no, that was awful, you should quit, you shouldn't do this. But there was, oh, try this. And so looking at that, yes, what else creates that positive, friendly environment? What happens in your club that you love?
Some people are posting in the chat. For instance, Jenny Lou said, organized, supportive, and welcoming setting that's safe and supportive, which is similar to what was said. And then Lee Chen said, feel your home, that you are home. So just to share those thoughts that they post.
Great. I've seen so many different techniques, and some of them are techniques that when I've visited clubs around the world, there is nothing that brings people together like breaking bread. I've gone to Toastmasters where there's muffins and coffee because it's early morning and they know people got in their car and drove down there. Well, 2 years ago, they got in their car and drove down there, and they would come in and have muffin and coffee and stand around and chat. In my home club, we actually go for coffee after we've drank coffee at the meeting. So we like one another. The other thing that we've done in our club is that there was 5 of us women that were writers, and we created a little writing group. So once a month we get together to support one another in our writing, because that started coming out in our speeches as different concepts we were working on books. And so we found one another, and we found groups within our club that made it positive and friendly and supportive, and certainly encouraged us to learn and grow. Evaluations done in a great supportive way is a way to help people learn and grow in a positive environment. To, it seems conspicuous, but sometimes it's not done. To give the positives, what worked, one suggestion for improvement, what was outstanding about it, making sure that that person's confidence is intact and actually boosted at the end of that evaluation. When I joined Toastmasters, I joined as a person that didn't want to speak. I wasn't interested in leadership. I wouldn't even say the word. But I joined Toastmasters because I was afraid to walk into a room where there were people. I was afraid they would look at me, that they would judge me, that I would be wrong. And so imagine, that's what I hold when someone comes in as a guest into my club. I look at them and say, how fragile are they? And I wait for them to tell me and let me know how fragile they are. Otherwise, I assume that they're where I was because that's my context. Now, most of them are nowhere near what I was in terms of being afraid and invisible and just wanting to walk into a room where there were people. But it's getting to know them and making that safe place. There was a number of years ago, I was visiting and working with a district, and I love to secret shop. Does everybody know what secret shop is? Or be a secret shopper? So let me tell you what happened. My best friend many years ago owned a number of stores. And of course, they couldn't be at every store all the time. So she would hire secret shoppers to go in and find out how the staff was treating their customers and what was happening in the stores. And so every once in a while, I would go in and be the secret shopper. And it's amazing what you find out when the boss is not there. They need to incorporate a promise with the employees and the owners of the business. But anyway, I thought this is a great concept. I could secret shop Toastmaster clubs. Don't tell anybody who you are. Just walk in, sit down, see how they treat guests. See if there is a supportive, welcome environment where people could learn and grow. And one club sticks out very vividly in my mind. Had to drive quite a distance from where I was. It took about an hour and a half to drive to this meeting, but I found out it was meeting a night. I was in a hotel and I thought, I have nothing else to do. I'm going to this Toastmaster club. So I drove to the Toastmasters club. I walked in. It was in the back of a building. I walked in, I looked around and everybody was busy organizing the agenda and setting up, etc. And so nobody said anything to me. So I sat down and they didn't have any agenda. They obviously knew what they were going to do, I guess. And so I sat there and then the meeting started without much fanfare. There was no guest introduction. So I sat through the meeting without being acknowledged even. Nobody asked me my name, who I was, where I came from, how I found them. Was I interested in Toastmasters? And the meeting ended and I walked out. I went and bought a coffee and drove back to the hotel and I went, now I know why this club has 10 members. And I'll soon have 8 and soon we'll have 6. I was invisible. I was back to 1983 when I walked into my first Toastmaster club. I was invisible. And they forgot their promise on that line to have that positive, friendly environment necessary for all members to learn and grow, or to even get in the door. So important. How do we feel about our promise to do that? Not just them, for them, but for us. The next promise is to serve my club as an officer when called upon to do so. So this one, I don't like this line because I actually got called on this one. A very brief story. I was finishing up being international president 2010, 2011. So it was elections in 2011 at my club in the spring, and I was going to be finishing in August being international president. And my current club executive came to me and said, "We need you to be president." And I went, no, I do not have it in me to be club president. I've had enough president for a while. I need a break. And they just, quick as a snap of a finger, said, "Yes, but you promised to serve as a club officer when called upon to do so, and we're calling upon you." I went, "Okay, you got me. I will serve, but I need some help between now and when I'm finished being president." And so they said, "We'll do that, but we need you to be president." And so I got called on that. So I don't like that promise very much, but only because it's self-serving, right? And isn't that what we do with promises sometimes? The next one is to treat my fellow club members and our guests with respect and courtesy, and how lovely that is, and how it ties in with our core values when we think of respect, service, when we think of excellence. To bring guests to club meetings. If we remember our Toastmasters Promise, should our club ever be in trouble membership-wise? If we're bringing guests to club meetings so that they can see the benefits of Toastmasters? That's a convenient one to forget, but we promised to bring guests. Sometimes it's not easy. I found it easy for many, many years because I did training in the corporate world, and I would see people every week, and I would pick out a star every week and invite them to my Toastmasters club. And I'd say, "You're the star this week. You're the rising star that I identified. Please come to Toastmasters and see what it's about." It was easy. Life circumstances change. It's not always so easy. But do we ask? Would you have been in Toastmasters today if somebody had failed to ask you to come? How did you arrive? Did you just find the open door and walk through it? Or were you invited by someone who kept their promise? So we promised to adhere to the guidelines and rules for all Toastmasters education and recognition program, and to maintain honest and high ethical standards during the conduct of all Toastmasters activities. So I invite you to revisit your Toastmasters Promise at your convenience, at your leisure, and explore what it means to you. To ask yourself, how do you relate to a promise, both to yourself and to others? And how many times do you make a promise without consciously thinking and contemplating what's involved? In my home club, we use the Toastmaster Promise as the new member induction. They sign it when they become a member. We've all signed it when we became members. And then they're called on to promise this in front of the group. And then the group in return promises to support them to keep it going. So I leave you with the question around the promise. How are you doing? And I ask myself on an ongoing basis, how am I actually doing with this promise? See, Toastmasters is an education organization, and people come knocking on our doors every day looking for communication, leadership, listening, thinking, speaking skills. They're looking for something, and it's our responsibility to respond, to provide them the place where they can come and learn. In Toastmasters, there's no pass or fail. There's no regimented time frame because we work on a self-paced program, and we can stall people out. We can stall ourselves out if we fail to keep our word with ourselves and others. Now, I know it's easier to break our word with ourselves than others sometimes because we think it's hidden, that nobody will find out. But oh, What if those Toastmaster members call you and say, you know, I promised to support you and I see you sneaking out of things and canceling out. I'd like to call you forward and see you giving some more presentations. I see you're reluctant in pathways. How can I support you? The amazing thing that I find with Toastmasters education program is that although it looks like there's one way of doing it, we all arrive with different needs. We all start in different places. We all have unique paths. And that's the brilliance of the program, that whoever we are, wherever we start, we can make progress and grow when we're supported, when we support others, and that comes back to us. And so I challenge you to keep your promise to yourself, to believe in your growth, your continued development as you work the Toastmasters Promise. And I believe that greatness comes when we keep our promises to ourselves, to others, because it challenges us to push through those things that make us uncomfortable, just like we did when we did our icebreaker. Remember that one? I do, and mine was a lot of years ago. I remember wearing slacks when I presented for many, many years because my skirt would vibrate or would shake so bad, and I didn't want anybody to know I was that nervous. So I would wear pants to the meeting. But I digress. So I want you to consider being bold this year, keeping your promise. Keep your Toastmasters promise to yourself, to your club, to your fellow members, to your area, your division, your district, to the board of directors, and lastly, and firstly, to yourself. So having talked about the promise, I want to talk a bit about the Toastmasters core values because it ties right in. They are locked, they're woven into one another. When we look at integrity as the first core value of our program, what does integrity mean to you? And I invite you to write this in the chat. What does, or even unmute, because there's not a lot of us, unmute. What does integrity mean to you?
Pat?
Yep, Salazar.
I usually say, for me, integrity means being true to my beliefs and principles, but not at the expense of another person.
Okay, great. And I saw
Hill entered keeping my word, by the way. She entered.
Yeah. See, we often, how do I put this? Let me get my brain sorted here first. We can use the core values of looking out there and saying, you are out of integrity. You didn't do this. Your club doesn't do this. But what if we turn that around and say, how am I doing? How am I in integrity? So do I belong to a club that is in integrity with Toastmasters? What does that mean? Is your club in integrity? Well, when I read what's necessary for us to be a Toastmaster club, it actually says we need to meet a minimum of 12 times a year. We must have a prepared presentations and oral evaluations. So if you're in a club that's not doing formal presentations, you're out of integrity. And it says we have a minimum of 20 members. If you don't have more than 20 members in your club is out of integrity. And your promise to yourself and your colleagues, where is that? Now, I'm not here to judge. I'm just asking questions for you to ask yourself. So I look at clubs and I'm curious when clubs are happy to be 10 members. And there's lots of reasons why clubs have 10 members. But if I look at a club for example, when I was district director in 2001, 2, a long time ago, and I still remember it. If I look at a club at that time that had 12 members, and now 20 years later, I look at that club and it still has 12 or 11 members, I ask, what's going on in that club? Because I know my belief would be that there's a culture created there, that 11 is a good number or 12 is a good number. And we don't want to get too big. And yet they're out of integrity for 20 years. And that's what they've got used to, is not keeping their promise. And it impacts the service and the excellence that they provide. Now, no judgment. I'm just looking at, would I personally go to a club where I could get 30 members to give me evaluations and listen to my presentation and be much more diverse, or would I go to 8? Now, I joined a club that had 8 members, so I know what it's like, and I know why we had 8. And I know that the experience for me is richer when there's 30 members, different variety. I don't have to listen to the same speaker every week because I go regularly. I'm not giving feedback the same person every second week. So look at the integrity of the club and just be curious about it. Is the club in integrity? Looking at respect, I hear, and I certainly have observed, a lot of conflict in Toastmasters. And where there's people, there's conflict. Sometimes we're upset because there's change and we don't like change, or we have a hard time coping with it. Sometimes we don't like the people that come to play. Sometimes I don't know. Some people just don't like us or whatever it is. There's conflict, difference of opinions. This is an opportunity to grow. I look at my Toastmasters club as like a fishbowl, a safe place for me to go and swim. And I'm going to come across all kinds of creatures in there, and they're going to be different than me. Some of them are going to be the same as me. And I'm going to get to figure out what respect looks like. What do they consider respect? Because they might have a different definition of respect based on how they were raised, what their personal circumstances are, etc. But can we respect one another? Now, I didn't say love or like one another. I'm talking about respect. And it's not for you to look out there, again, in my opinion, but it's to say those are our core values of an organization that I belong to. How do I show respect? Do I have space for differences? Or do I stand in judgment? What if there was, this is my coaching question, what if there was no right or wrong? What happens in your head when I say that? Do you go, but there is? What if there wasn't a right or wrong? What if it's all context? That if we took this circumstance that feels really wrong over here, according to our perception, and moved it over here, and in that context, it was just all okay. What if there was no right or wrong? There was just differences. I don't know. That's how I like to look at differences in people, circumstances, opinions, views. I watch Facebook very little because the judgment and the criticism and the attack of people because they don't share an opinion that I share is horrendous. And I go, why would people participate in this? They're slamming and attacking, and I don't find that respectful, right? So what is respect, and looking at respect? To go back to integrity, because I looking at people writing definitions of integrity. For me, integrity is when my thoughts, my words, and my actions all are in alignment. Then I'm in integrity. So my thoughts, my words, and my actions are all in alignment. So I think something, I say it, so I tell the truth. And it might be difficult to say, but it's my truth. And then my actions follow through. And that for me is integrity, for me. So when we look at service in the context of our clubs, what an opportunity, right? Think of us as a franchise. So we've just opened our doors, we put up our great big yellow sign. Oh no, it's not McDonald's, it's Toastmasters. And somebody says, oh, I know, I've heard of Toastmasters. And they walk in the door, and do they meet the global organization of Toastmasters International? Or do they meet the version of that Pat Johnson's created, because Pat doesn't like this, and she doesn't like that, and you sit down and be quiet, and I'm running the show, so it's the Pat show. Or it's the Salazar show. Or we don't do evaluations because I can't handle evaluations. So we start and we skew the program, and then the person that comes in that door with that, seeing the yellow sign, expecting the program, doesn't get the program. How do we provide service, consistency of service to our members? And knowing that we represent the brand. We are the representative. We're the product of the brand of the program and providing service to our members. How many of you love to meet those brand new guests and ask them why they're coming to Toastmasters? Isn't that the most fun? I mean, for years, it's the one thing that kept me going to Toastmasters, because I loved meeting the new people and all the things that they thought they were going to do because they became a Toastmaster. I loved it. And I am this year the VP of membership, my favorite position in my club. And I love talking to those people, talking about the benefits and matching it up with what they're looking for and what they need. And even sometimes what they're afraid to say that they want. So many things we can give them to talk about the transferable skills and how we learn by doing, being able to unfold all those roles like Toastmaster. Well, you could MC events, you could bring teams together, you can do strategic planning, you can work to objectives, you can on and on we go with what the transferable skills are by being Toastmaster. What does being grammarian teach us? Well, think of the skills we learn in listening, the lost art of listening. We actually teach it. Every time we evaluate, we listen, and then we think critically, we analyze, and then we provide feedback, all transferable skills in the world. We can provide service to those people who walk in the door by helping them understand what all they can get. And then when they've got some skills and some comfort there, they can go on to be a leader of a team as an area director, or they could lead a team of teams, being the division director, or maybe even the district or international director. In some parts of the world, to sit on an international board is very prestigious. To sit and build policy for an international organization, to look at the budget of an international organization, to be selected and elected to an international board in an organization that reaches around the globe is very prestigious. But it's also such a rich learning environment. If it's ever on your radar, say yes, raise your hand, get some coaching, get some mentoring, and go for it. If you love policy, if you love strategic planning, do not deny yourself this opportunity. Toastmasters is there to provide that service for you, to sit on that board and guide the future of an organization that reaches around the globe. Say yes to yourself. Listen to that dream. So it brings us to excellence. And what is excellence? Again, as I said at the very beginning of talking about the core values, it's really about what it is for us. What is excellence? I'm curious of what your definition of excellence is. How do you define that in your realm?
Trying to do our best.
Okay, trying to do your best. Okay, great.
Having
Okay.
high standards.
Okay, having high standards. Okay,
Setting
Always-
goals and achieving those goals that you set.
okay, achieving those goals you set. I like to think of excellence, and I don't have one solid definition, but what I know is that we all have a comfort zone, right? And our comfort zone is inside this circle. And outside of that lives fear. Those are the things that we're afraid of. So they could be skydiving. How many of you love skydiving? Raise your hand. Okay, so Solazar has a bigger comfort zone because inside his comfort zone is skydiving, and Philip's hand went up also. When we did our icebreaker, if we were afraid and we faced it anyway, our circle got bigger because now communicating or public speaking or communicating in front of a group became our comfort zone. And then we did table topics and it expanded. And then we became area director and it expanded. And then we chartered a club and it expanded. Then we got a promotion as a result of all those skills at work, and our comfort zone expanded some more. And it keeps expanding. And that, as human beings, is what keeps us engaged when we're always expanding. But we have to be willing to push against that fear. Many years ago, somebody told me that fear is a coward, that as soon as you face it head on, it disappears. And I've tested that theory and it's true. I was terrified to be an area director or an area governor, but I faced it and I loved it. I was terrified to be an international director. I didn't think I had what it took. And when I arrived at the first board meeting, I was in love. Oh, I loved it. We could analyze, we could talk about it, we could pull it apart and put it together a different way. And my brain was in brain heaven to play with policy and bylaws and look at the great big picture of Toastmasters. Oh, I digress. But for me, it's taking and pushing our comfort zone so we're always looking, not for what's excellence for Pam or Jenny or Sarah or Daniel or Jackie or Philip, but what's excellence for us. To keep challenging ourselves to be a better version of who we are. So I want to leave you with a challenge. Well, two challenges. I want to challenge you and invite you to revisit your Toastmasters Promise. Not for those out there, but for us, for you personally. And I want to invite you to contemplate, to sit, to pull apart, to massage and think about, what do the core values actually mean to you personally? How do you show up to represent them? If you were asked to build a play around those 4 core values, what would it look like? What would it be? Or if you had to write a song about them, what would it sound like? And if you had to walk into a room and represent them, what would that look like? So I invite you to dig down into the promise, to dig down for yourself into those core values and know that they're the foundation of what we do in Toastmasters. And it helps us grow our comfort zone and our own greatness. So I promise to you that I will continue to review my Toastmasters Promise, not memorize it like that District 81 group did, but to review it and stay aware of it. And I promise that I will remain aware and represent the core values to the best of my ability. And now, what would you like to promise to you? Back to you, Salazar.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. That concludes the formal presentation from Pat Johnson. That was spectacular. And we'll share questions now. If you haven't already asked a question in the chat, please enter it. We will want everyone to know that tonight's session formally concludes at 7 p.m. You're welcome to leave. Pat will be staying beyond that to continue to answer questions no later than 7:30. So if you need to leave, please feel free to do so. Our next TLI is next Tuesday, August 10th, with accredited speaker Donnie Crandall, sharing how to be a servant leader, which ties very much together with our presentation tonight from Pat Johnson about our Toastmasters Promise, which is about developing and integrating that promise to be a servant leader. So he'll be here next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. If you haven't already signed up for it, please do. Visit d101tm.org/TLI to get more information. So I have a couple of questions for you, but first, I am shocked, Pat. I am shocked. I did not realize this isn't my show. When first time anyone's told me that, I don't know how I'm going to handle the rest of my life.
Okay, I've got a therapist you can talk to, and I'm a really good coach. I can help you.
But the other thing is, what are techniques you would recommend we use to remind our club members? What are different ways to integrate the promise into our normal practice so that not only does it feel natural, but it reminds all of us? So not that we need to remember it, but that it reminds us that we've actually promised that. Do you have any recommendations?
A couple that we do in my home club and that I've seen done other places. First of all, is the new member induction, to use it as that, so that when we have members coming in regularly, we hear the promise, and then we're also asked as current members to support them in keeping that promise. And so we have a part in that. I think also too, if we have agendas, to put it on the agenda, just as we put it in the Toastmasters magazine. We might not consciously see it, but what I know is unconscious stuff happens as well. We flip open the page, we go, oh, that's Toastmaster Promise, I'm not reading that, but we know the Toastmaster Promise is there. And also think about if you have an education moment in your Toastmasters meeting. So if you have say a 3-minute education component, which we do in our meetings, take the Toastmaster Promise as one of those meetings, one of those education sessions. Also to take it to your club executive meeting and talk about how you can integrate it. Or as I've done, use it as table topics. Take it apart and say, as part of our Toastmaster Promise, when we all joined, we agreed to help the club maintain a friendly, positive environment necessary for all members to learn and grow. Please tell me, Lee, how you would do that.
Mm.
And there it is. Then you get everybody talking about it. And so those are a couple of things off the top of my head that I would suggest.
Those are great ideas, though, especially, of course, I'm sure many people are familiar with the new member induction piece, but the others are certainly different ways of approaching it that I like. If you don't mind, Pat, there were a couple of comments in the chat about going back to integrity that we really didn't get to share. And I'd like to share their comments from Jenny Liu, that integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching, which comes from C.S. Lewis. So, and then Sarah Ivy said, being honest, respectful, and accountable for your own actions. And Chandra Vadani said, the correlation between what I do and what I say. And of course, Henry Miller says it all ties back to the promise to yourself and your membership of your club.
Mhm.
I really like that the promise ends with our core ethics, because I'm not asking and I'm not presenting, but just rhetorically, I wonder how many of us forgot that we have 4 core values that are part of our Toastmaster promise: to be respectful, to operate with integrity, to give excellence, to give service. Do you find that that seems to be one of the issues, even more than the other elements of the promise, that we miss in our Toastmaster journey sometimes?
Well, the way the promise is written purely as itself, the core values are not written into it, but they are woven through it in the nature, because as soon as I think of service, it's all about a service is talking about servicing your club as an officer when called upon to do so, to treat your members and guests with respect. So there's respect showing up, but it's also service, to adhere to the guidelines, to provide, like when you're providing an environment, that's a service to the members and to the guests. When we look at integrity, it's to when we show up, when we say we're going to show up, when we're on the agenda, we show up. That's integrity. To prepare all my speeches, nobody's walking around checking to see how much time I spent on that, but that's my integrity with me. Did I prepare fully my assignments? Do I provide fellow members with supportive, constructive feedback? That's my integrity. That's my promise to them. So again, they're so woven in. That's part of service as well. And then excellence comes also in so many of these items. So if we're striving for excellence, don't we go all the time so we can practice and build our skills? Don't we listen to the feedback that's given to us that wants us to improve, because they're supportive and positive and they see the best in us? So they give us suggestions to keep growing. And that provides an environment of excellence where slopping it through is not an option. So my great lesson in excellence was the year that I was international president. Whenever I was home, I attended my club meeting, which was almost every week. I seldom missed a meeting because it's on Thursday morning, 7:00 a.m. Nobody else wants me, so I can go to my Toastmaster meeting, right? So I'm at my Toastmasters meeting, and I walked in, and somebody said, what was her name? I forget her name now, but so-and-so is sick this morning, is ill. She just texted us, can you fill in a speech? And I went, oh, sure. I thought, I'm speaking every day, every week. Surely I can do a speech at my club for 7 minutes. So I just wrote a couple lines on a page, and I got up and I presented a 7-minute presentation. And we had a fairly new transfer into our club who was my evaluator. And I remember him. His name was Julian. And Julian got up to evaluate me. And he'd been a Toastmaster about 4 years in the club where he'd transferred from, and he'd been with us for about 6 months. And he got up and he said, Madam President, with all due respect, as president, we hold you to a higher standard, and this was not the standard. This was, we deserve better than this, and this is not worthy of you. And he just really let me have it. And the room, the air, the oxygen was just sucked out of the room, because everybody went, as Julian delivered this evaluation, like, how dare he? And I'm like, oh, I love this. I'm sitting there grinning, and everybody's almost in tears. And so at the end of the meeting, it was very quiet and uncomfortable. And at the end of the meeting, I stood up and closing comments, and I said, I want to acknowledge Julian for calling a spade a spade. I did not do my best. but he did. And I appreciate it. And I've learned from it. And after, people were coming to me, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, don't apologize. You did. First of all, it wasn't your evaluation. Secondly, I appreciated what he did. People need to, regardless of what position we hold, it's not sacred. I'm in Toastmasters to continually grow. I don't want to be untouchable or it's all, everything she does is right. Then I better quit, right? I'm just taking up space. If I'm not learning, then I'm taking up space. And so I was so appreciative of him. And I just hold that very dear to me for years now. It's been 10 years, 11 years since that happened. But that was a great evaluation, in my opinion. And he was brave, not because of me, but because of the club. And he called people to excellence. And I say, yay, Julian.
Well, he was also respectful too. He had that, he said, Madam President, we hold you to a higher standard, and this didn't meet that standard. Now that lets you know where the evaluation was going to go in that sense.
Yeah.
This wasn't going to be a happy to glad type of presentation, but he did actually do it, also did it respectfully, respecting you, your position, your experience as well. Yeah. That's
And you know what? From then on, whenever I thought, oh, I'll just wing this, I had second thoughts. I could hear Julian going, Madam President. So we never know when our evaluations are going to walk around and sit on somebody's shoulder for years later and be waving at them, right? When they go to do something. Yeah.
So do you have any background or experience as to where the development of the core ethics came from? Why those 4 ethics? What made them the ones that they picked out?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I think that I think they happened after I left the board, that we actually went back and developed 4 core values. We, the mission got changed and the vision got changed. All of those things got upgraded. When I was there, the controversial thing we did was branding. So, and a few other things. We did a dues increase. No, I don't remember. Yeah, that's the short answer. And I don't know when the Toastmaster Promise came about either. Okay. It's been around. It was there when I joined in '83. So maybe they put it in place when women joined the organization.
To tell the men to behave?
Thank you for that one, Pat. It would have been 1960 then.
1973, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
That was to keep the men in line, I guess. Now, some of the language of it has shifted through the years, but for the most part, the promise has stayed there. I think the promise is one of those critical elements. I really appreciate you sharing that with us, because I think I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'm going to, because it's my show.
Really? Okay, where would you be with all of us?
Yeah. But I think sometimes we all forget little elements of the promise and say, just like, I think you reminded me of so many things this evening. And it's not that I only looked at the promise last week for something. And I have to admit that it reminded me, no, my job is actually to bring guests to meetings. It's not like it's an optional thing, or wouldn't it be nice if we all brought guests to me? No, it's my promise that I'll bring guests to meetings, as well as all the other elements.
And, and I think that's really scary for people. But think of the skills, because everything in Toastmasters is about learning. Think of the skills you build when you decide that you're going to ask somebody to Toastmasters. First of all, you have to get out of your own way and get over yourself, right? And then you get in that person's shoes and say, blah, 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 whatever the circumstances are. And and be able to talk about the benefits of Toastmasters, not what we do. Don't tell them what we do because that's just scary. But what can you learn? How does it, like if somebody's a supervisor at work, man, Toastmasters is an automatic default for them in terms of building teams and giving evaluation, having difficult conversations, setting standards and holding people to them, accountability, that leading meetings, that's just a no-brainer for anybody that's in supervision. Frontline supervisors, as soon as they started building their careers at work, I was on them. Get to Toastmasters, get some feedback skills. Learn how to build a team, learn how to talk to your team.
Especially
Yeah.
since you mentioned at work, I want to remind people that you wrote the penultimate book of the Handbook for Building and Sustaining Vibrant Toastmaster Programs and Corporations. And last year we took that to heart, where you even talk about speak their language, change your messaging to speak their language. So for the folks here who are part of a corporation, if you're looking to expand a club or build a club, get the book. It's on the Toastmaster store, but it talks about how to take our Toastmaster language and turn it into the corporate language so they'll understand the one-on-one trade-off of the skill set. Is really fabulous. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you. It was a result of running learning and development departments in the corporate world and government agencies, and actually sitting in my director's chair saying, would I bring Toastmasters into my organization? Would I show this to the CEO? And the answer was absolutely not. And that horrified me because I love Toastmasters. And I went, what would I need to do to actually be able to bring it into the corporation? And I went, get rid of the jargon, first of all, make it something that they understand so we don't sound like a cult that they all want to say. Then quit talking about it being a club because now it sounds exclusive rather than inclusive. Start talking about tuition, so it sounds like it's actually education and we're paying to go to school, and talk about experiential learning and competencies and all those things that the adult educators talk about. And let them know that it's a practice place. It's a place to practice because it's a concept in the corporate education world that is unknown. We don't go to practice things. We go and sit, we call them bums in seats. We put bums in seats and we count those every day. And we report at the end of the month that we had 340 people, bums in seats this month for training. I mean, that's how we count the data. But then my question was, how do we know they learned anything? So then we incorporated follow-up. So they had to then do a follow-up session to actually graduate or get the completion in the corporate training. But I looked at all of that with Toastmasters and I went, there's no accountability. So then it was like, okay, we build accountability. We put this through performance, employee performance plans and have them decide with their supervisors. And then you have to partner with the corporation because they should be sending the people to training. We don't put on a project management course in our corporation and tell the first person that signs up that, hey, Henry, I see you signed up for project management. If you get 19 more people, we'll put on the course. Away you go. That isn't how training works in the corporate world. They send people. They don't ask the student to go and fill the class. So it's, that's where it all came from, was just, well, what I call common sense, sitting in that director's chair going, these are all the things I would change with the Toastmasters presentation so we could actually get the curriculum in-house and get it accessed. Because it's all the external trappings and it's our language that creates barriers. And I just saw Jenny had marked in the chat about volunteers. This is one of my pet peeves and has been for many years. And I've had conversations with many, many people about this. We are not volunteers. We are students. We all paid tuition to belong here. We voluntarily do things as students to learn, but that's different than being a volunteer. We are not volunteers. We are students.
And that's an
And-
excellent distinction. Please go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, and so I think that's really important, and I'm thrilled that Margaret is talking about that. You know, more voices to it, right? It's such a powerful distinction that, you know, our language, in my opinion, sometimes this gets us in trouble because we allow people to say, oh, we're just volunteers, so I don't have to do it. I go, well, you signed up for the curriculum. The curriculum requires this. So as a student, don't you want to learn what you signed up to do? Oh, well, I'm just a volunteer. Well, you voluntarily signed up to take the program. So, I mean, we're not going to hold, you know, a brick over your head to do it, but this is the curriculum you signed up for. And I believe that the universe is the greatest teacher because it goes, oh, goody, goody. I got Pat as area director and here's a surprise for her. And guess what? It's just a test in life. It's not serious. What are we going to do with that test? And it's just an opportunity to step forward as a student in life and be curious and say, how can I handle this? Like, I guess for me, I see learning as a part of a spiritual path and it's unfolding it. How can I be my most evolved person being? And who am I in my beingness? Not just what I do, but what's my attitude when I do something? That's what counts in this world, I think. Not that we tick boxes. Ticking boxes has no prestige with me. People say, oh, you're international president. I said, wow, you should know, you should hear all the things I learned. Because that's what matters to me is the journey and how I reacted to the events. You know, my great aunt, Pearl, she's one of my heroes. And she used to tell me when I was growing up, because her and I were the white sheep of our families. And she used to say to me that you'll be known by the company you keep. And so I always wanted to be in around people that aspired to great things because that would encourage me. But I also live with me every day. And so I wanted to aspire to great things so that I could hold myself accountable and be curious, to read, to talk to people, to do things that are outside of this comfort zone of mine, which used to be really, really small.
Well, I believe when you shared your journey, that's an important part of how small you were and how big you are, in the sense of you allowed your light to shine and your light to come out. And it's about the journey. I think you're such an excellent role model for all of us to actually see this and hear this and listen. Because when we talked earlier, even about integrity, about the congruence of what I do and what I say, you're a representative of that. And that's just a gift for all of us. Just you being here and sharing that is a gift for all of us. You know, a couple of weeks ago, Philip Hardy said when he visited about 1,100 clubs, and he said he can tell the sense of a club by when he walks in, if the president says, "This is my club," you know, versus "This is our club." It's kind of like "This is my show" versus "This is our show."
Good point.
Yeah. But I think that's a great way for all of us to also look at to whether we're just my thought of, are we following the promise and are we listening to the core ethics? Are we applying the core ethics? Because if it's mine, I'm not applying the core ethics. I can't possibly be respecting the other members. So
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I think it brings up another point when you say my, one of the bandwagons that I get on every once in a while is that when district directors say, well, this is my year, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
And I now interrupt and say, excuse me, it's your district's year every year. You have the privilege of being the district director this year, but it is always your district's year.
yeah, that's right. They're essentially, but that is where, and I may be wrong here, so please do correct me. But that's where I think when we take leadership roles, though, I think that's where we're volunteering to be of service, because we're there as the guardians of the Toastmasters that we serve. And that's our true service. But I do feel like is that not a volunteer? I realize as a member, I didn't volunteer, but aren't I volunteering to be of service, or am I just committing to my promise?
Well, I can only speak for myself. It is not volunteer for me. When I became international president, somebody asked me what I was going to do as president, and I said I'm going to get one more CC and finish my 4th DTM. And they kind of looked at me and went, no, that's not what I meant. And I said, well, that's what I can do. The rest of it's going to be done by the organization and the members in it. And there'll be a bunch of activities take place, but what I personally can do. And I went into president to learn how. I didn't know how, but I had many years of preparation. I was 5 years on the executive committee, so 4 years in preparation to how to be president. Great learning. And I walked around all those years with my head just exploding. I devoured books. Like I read 10 books a week, just couldn't get enough of concepts and ideas, and both in leadership, but presentations, but also in organizational development was a huge thing, because we were going through organizational development, and we did rebranding, and we created the region advisors, and we did a whole bunch of stuff organizationally. We went from a mom and pop shop at world headquarters. We got rid of our print shop. We put policies and bylaws. We rewrote all the policies and bylaws in that year. So I was just gobbling stuff so I could be informed and bring outside opinions. So it was like being in a learning lab 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that clarification and for straightening me out so I don't damage any Toastmasters along the way.
Well, but you know, it's different for everybody. It's different for everybody. That's my attitude, and that's my approach to life, that I feel that, you know, Jana Barnhill's past husband, or his, you know, how do I say it? Her deceased husband, Bob, he had on his desk at the work that says, when you're done learning, you're done.
Yeah.
And I believe that. So I'm going to keep learning.
Well, I certainly meant that facetiously. I just want to say that is that
Oh,
I think you've provided us a great framework, not just for the promise, but for how we can look at our total role within Toastmasters. That we've made a commitment. We've made a commitment to our members, to our organizations, and to ourselves. And how do we accommodate that? And it doesn't mean every minute we're doing all three of those, but we have to remember we've made that commitment. That's our promise. That's the power of that promise.
yeah, absolutely. And you know, in the promise, there's no room for ego. You know, this, and Toastmasters is not an ego trip. It's not, oh, I'm the president, la-di-da. No, because the president spends their whole year doing things for other people and learning how to survive in that office so that they can continue to serve the organization and be a worthy steward of it. Same as international directors, same as district directors. We arrive in that, and then we work hard to protect and be good stewards of what was left to us. And so we can leave a legacy and pass it on to those that come behind us. So, yeah, and I think that, you know, some people get in more than they think they can handle. But again, my great aunt Pearl said that you'll never be tested beyond what you can endure. And I think she got that from a much bigger authority than herself. But, you know, but I always believed that. I went, okay, I know somebody that knows how to do this, or I can figure this out, or I'll read some more on this, or I can learn how to figure this out. And when I used to get problems that were very complex. I had a very dear friend who could sit and figure anything out. She just could sort the most minute little details out. She could put, those terrible wires on the back of electronics and sort them all out and actually make it work. And so every time I would get something that felt really bit twiddly to me and go, oh, this is, I would think of Sheila. And I would go, if Sheila can do it, I can do it. And so, it's those people that have come and gone in our lives that are models. And I've often told her how frustrated I would be when what felt to me like some really detailed work came along, which is not my skill. And I would say out loud, okay, Sheila would do this, so I can do this. And I often told her, I said, you got me through those things where I had to just buckle down and get it done. So yes, bit twiddly. Yeah.
Right,
Thanks, Philip.
Daniel also shared in the chat about servant leadership is what we learn and practice here at Toastmasters. It's a little bit before Philip's bit twiddly.
and I, with all due respect, I would like to say that we learn service leadership, not servant leadership, because that is trademarked. That phrase does not belong to Toastmasters. It is a trademarked concept out there that books were written about. So I suggest that we learn service leadership.
But doesn't it also, trademark aside, doesn't it create a different impression? Servant leadership almost puts me at the beck and call of the people I lead. Service leadership means I'm there to provide service. I'm actually doing for them, not being directed by them, so to speak, if that makes sense. I think service leadership is a very powerful phrase.
Well, for me, it feels more consistent with integrity, respect, service, and excellence. And it's a slight difference, but in my mind, when I hear servant leadership, because I've read the books and I know the concepts, but it doesn't resonate with me because of the background of servant leadership. I don't buy into it. It's not my belief system. But when I step back and I go service leadership, now it resonates with me.
It reminds me back to 43 BC, when I was helping with those pyramids.
Yes, good for you. Good job. That was long-lasting work. Obviously, excellence.
I never got my overtime, though, I just have to say.
Well, you know what? You have the legacy, though. Think of the legacy, the millions of people that have gone to see your work.
That's right.
And only nature will destroy it.
That's true. So, Pat, are there any final thoughts, ideas, or memes that you would just like to leave us with to get us moving forward more powerfully in our Toastmasters?
Oh my. A couple things. I believe that we all outgrow our club sometime. If you're not afraid in your club, go find a new club. Be afraid. Be very afraid. I think that's where we grow. When we lose fear, we quit growing. So find a new club if you're not afraid in your club. And secondly, find a very powerful mentor who will hold you to the standard that you should be held. I believe wholeheartedly that I'm only here because of the people around me that supported me, that believed in me, that saw things in me before I was ever capable of seeing them. And they never let me let it go. They just kept holding me to that standard. So look for those rising stars around you in the district, in your club, and encourage them. Last year in my home club, we had 5 area directors and 1 division director because I held them accountable. Now, they held themselves also capable and accountable, but that's a lot from one club. But they were all capable of doing it and wouldn't have done it without somebody asking them and saying, you can do this. And here's why. Here's what I've seen you do. So call those people forward, but also call yourself forward. Raise, put a high goal up there. Have a vision of where you want to go. I have a vision of what I want to do when I'm 102. Do you? Like, I want to walk across a world stage and be acknowledged for my lifetime achievements when I'm 102. And I want to be able to kick up my heels when I get that award. Now, I haven't got a clue who's going to give it to me, or probably somebody old, right? But it's what keeps me going. It doesn't matter that it's, you know, if it makes sense, but it's my vision. Have a strong vision for yourself that pulls you. Look at things around you and find out what pulls you forward, not what you feel pushed to do, but what pulls you from your heart and your soul for your career, for your life work, for Toastmasters, for your family, everything. Do what pulls you. And, you know, I started out about 30 years ago and I said, I will never live with anything or anyone that I do not love. So I have nothing in my home that I don't love. I don't bring things into my home that I don't love, because it's like looking around and feeling joy at everything I see. The people, myself, the things that are around me. Now, I don't have lots of things because I'm not a thing person, but I love all that I have. So it affects us, and it affects our internal caring about ourselves and the respect we have for ourselves. Yeah. So get a good mentor, strong one that'll challenge you. Get a strong, challenging club that'll support you, and surround yourself with things you love so that you know when you're being pulled to do something, and then do it with all your beingness, all your beingness. Be brave and passionate about what you're going to do.
Thank you so much, Pat. And District 101, come on, let's hear it for Pat. Let's give her the
101.
Yeah. Or everybody who's here, it's not all 101. So just thank you so much for all you've shared and the heart with which you've shared it. So it's just such a pleasure and joy. It's a great gift that you share with us just by being present.
Well, thank you. And I'm honored to have been asked. Thank you for asking me and giving me the time. And I just want to acknowledge everybody that's here that shared their time with us, because what we know is that time is a non-renewable resource. We're not going to get back this